Margaret had always been independent. She prided herself on it, the ability to take care of herself, to move freely, to wake up each morning and go about her day without relying on anyone. But lately, something had changed. She could feel it in the way her body resisted getting out of bed, in the deep exhaustion that never quite faded, in the moments of dizziness that came out of nowhere. She told herself it was nothing. Just age. Just another restless night. But then came the night she couldn't ignore. She woke abruptly, a crushing weight pressing down on her chest. The air felt thick, her breath shallow. She tried to sit up, but her limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. Panic crept in. Was this just another bad night of sleep? Or was it something far worse? Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone, her heart pounding louder than the silence around her. She had never felt this before, this unshakable fear that something was deeply wrong. Every night, millions of people her age experience moments like this. Waking up groggy, feeling drained no matter how many hours they sleep, struggling with unexplained dizziness, sudden heart palpitations, or a strange sense of unease in the middle of the night. And yet, most dismiss the warning signs until it's too late. But what if poor sleep wasn't just an inconvenience? What if it was a silent thief, stealing your energy, your strength, your independence, little by little, night after night? The truth is, the way you sleep has more impact on your health than you realize. It affects your heart, your brain, your body's ability to recover. And the most dangerous part? These small, everyday habits, the ones that feel harmless, could be leading to life-altering consequences. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 sleep habits that might be quietly damaging your health. They're simple, easy to overlook, but they could be costing you more than just a good night's rest. And the third one? It's the most dangerous of all because it could take away your independence overnight. Stay with me until the end because the small changes you make tonight could add years to your life. And if you find these insights valuable, if you believe in making choices today that will protect your tomorrow, then join our community here at Elderly Wisdom Story. Subscribe now so you never miss another story that could change the way you think about your health and your future. Margaret had always found comfort in her nighttime routine. The soft glow of the television, the warmth of her favorite fleece blanket, the quiet satisfaction of a late-night snack, these small rituals made her feel safe. They were familiar, predictable, a way to wind down after the day. But every morning, as she swung her legs over the edge of the bed, that sense of comfort vanished. The exhaustion was relentless. No matter how many hours she spent in bed, she woke up feeling as if she hadn't slept at all. Her limbs felt heavy, her thoughts slow, as if she were moving through water. She told herself it was normal, that everyone her age felt this way. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. At first, she blamed it on age. But what if it wasn't just aging? What if her own habits, the things she had done for years without question, were quietly working against her? She had never considered how her sleep environment affected her body. She liked her room warm and cozy. But what she didn't realize was that a warm room was keeping her from getting the deep, restorative sleep she needed. When the body sleeps, it naturally cools down to trigger deeper sleep cycles. But when the room is too warm, the body struggles to regulate temperature, preventing it from fully resting. Instead of drifting into deep sleep, she remained in a lighter, more restless state, never quite reaching the level of rest her body desperately needed. And it wasn't just the temperature. Dehydration was another silent thief. Most people think dehydration happens during the day after too much time in the sun or not drinking enough water. But what Margaret didn't know was that at night, when the room is too warm, her body was losing moisture faster than she realized. Her blood thickened, her circulation slowed, and without knowing it, she was waking up already at a disadvantage. The dizziness she felt in the morning, the sluggishness, the unsteady feeling when she stood, she had blamed it on age, but it was her own nighttime environment quietly working against her. Then there was the way she ate before bed. It was a habit she never questioned, watching television with a snack, having a late dinner when she wasn't hungry earlier. It made her feel full, satisfied, comfortable. But beneath the surface, her body was struggling. Instead of slowing down for the night, her digestive system was forced to keep working, processing food when it should have been resting. That familiar tightness in her chest, the occasional nighttime coughing, the discomfort that made her shift in bed, all signs of acid reflux, a direct result of eating too close to bedtime. And the worst part? The way food affected her heart. When she ate late at night, her blood sugar spiked, increasing stress on her cardiovascular system just as it should have been recovering. The late-night meals she thought were harmless were quietly adding strain to her heart night after night. For years, she had unknowingly sabotaged her own recovery. She had spent her nights in a warm room, her body struggling against dehydration. She had eaten too late, forcing her body to work instead of rest. And every morning she had woken up exhausted, convinced that it was just part of growing older. But it wasn't. One small change at a time, she began to take control. She lowered the temperature in her bedroom, not drastically, just enough to allow her body to cool naturally. Within days, she noticed a difference. She wasn't waking up drenched in sweat. She wasn't tossing and turning, searching for comfort that never came. For the first time in years, she felt her body truly resting. Then she adjusted her eating habits. She made dinner earlier, allowing her body time to digest before bed. She avoided heavy, greasy foods late at night. And instead of reaching for a snack before bed, she chose something small, something light, just enough to satisfy without making her body work harder than it needed to. And the changes? They were almost immediate. The burning in her throat disappeared. The midnight awakenings became less frequent. She wasn't waking up gasping for air or shifting uncomfortably in bed. And most importantly, she woke up feeling lighter. Not just physically, but mentally. The fog had started to lift. She had spent years believing that waking up tired was inevitable, that struggling to get through the day was just part of getting older. But she was wrong. It wasn't her age that had been stealing her strength. It was her habits. And just as she thought she had solved the problem, just as she started to feel in control again, she discovered something else. Something she never would have considered. The way she slept, her sleep position, was putting even more stress on her heart than she ever imagined. And she was about to learn just how much it had been costing her. Margaret had finally started feeling like herself again. Waking up wasn't a battle anymore. The heavy exhaustion that had followed her for years was starting to lift. She had made changes, adjusting the temperature in her room, eating earlier, making sure her body could truly rest at night. It felt like she had cracked the code. But just when she thought she had done everything right, another problem surfaced, one she never saw coming. One night, she woke abruptly, gasping for air. It felt like her lungs had forgotten how to breathe, like something was pressing down on her chest, squeezing the air from her body. Her heart pounded violently, a frantic rhythm she couldn't control. She clutched at the sheets, trying to steady herself, trying to make sense of what was happening. She hadn't been dreaming. She hadn't been moving. She had just been sleeping. The feeling passed after a few minutes, but the fear remained. The next morning, she told herself it was nothing, just a strange fluke, a momentary discomfort. But the truth was, it had been happening for years. She had brushed off the restless nights, the occasional breathlessness, the way her heart sometimes raced for no reason. She thought it was stress. She thought it was normal. She never considered that the way she slept, the simple position of her body, was silently putting strain on her heart every single night. She had always been a back sleeper, felt natural, comfortable. But what she didn't know was that sleeping on her back was increasing her risk of sleep apnea, a condition where the airway collapses during sleep, forcing the body to wake up repeatedly throughout the night to restore breathing. It didn't always wake her fully. Sometimes it was just a brief gasp for air, a subconscious adjustment, a racing heart that she couldn't explain. But her heart was paying the price. Every time her breathing slowed or stopped, her oxygen levels dropped. And every time that happened, her heart had to work harder, beating faster to compensate for the lack of oxygen. It was a silent strain, one she never even knew was there. And over time, this nightly stress wasn't just making her exhausted. It was increasing her risk of high blood pressure, irregular heart rhythms, and even stroke. And if sleeping on her back wasn't bad enough, rolling onto her right side wasn't much better. She had never given much thought to which side she slept on, but studies have shown that sleeping on the right side puts additional pressure on the heart. It makes circulation more difficult, slows the flow of blood, and for people already at risk of heart disease, it can worsen fluid buildup in the lungs and legs. Margaret had spent so many nights waking up tired, never realizing that her body had been struggling to keep up. She thought she was resting, but in reality, her sleep was forcing her heart to fight all night long. But what if there was a way to fix it? It wasn't complicated. It wasn't expensive. In fact, it was one of the simplest changes she could make. She started sleeping on her left side. At first, it felt unfamiliar. Her body wanted to roll back into old habits, to return to the comfort it had known for years. But she stayed with it. She placed a pillow behind her back to keep from rolling over. She slightly elevated her head with a supportive pillow to help keep her airway open. And slowly, she noticed the difference. The nights of waking up gasping for air? They disappeared. The pounding heartbeat in the middle of the night? Gone. The restless tossing and turning? Fading. But the real change came in the mornings. For the first time in years, she woke up feeling rested. Not just better, truly rested. She could feel the difference in her chest, in her breathing, in the way her body moved. It was as if her heart had finally been given permission to rest, too. She had spent years unknowingly harming herself night after night. But with one small shift, one tiny adjustment, she had lifted the burden off her heart. And just as she began to believe she had solved the final piece of the puzzle, just as she thought she had taken back control of her nights, one last mistake nearly took everything away from her. Because waking up in the middle of the night wasn't always harmless. And she was about to learn the hard way. Margaret had spent so much time fixing her sleep. She had changed her nighttime routine, adjusted her sleeping position, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was finally on the right path. She had beaten the exhaustion, the racing heart, the restless nights. She had done everything right. Or so she thought. Then, one night, everything changed. It was 2 a.m. when she woke up suddenly. At first, she didn't know why. The room was quiet, the darkness undisturbed. But something felt off. Her body was restless, like an invisible force was pulling her awake. She took a deep breath and sat up. Her feet touched the cool floor. And then everything went black. When she opened her eyes, she was on the ground. A sharp, searing pain radiated from her hip, spreading through her entire body like fire. She tried to move, but the pain was unbearable. Her heart pounded in her ears as she struggled to understand what had happened. 1 second, she had been fine. The next, she was helpless on the floor. For the first time in her life, she felt truly afraid. She had never thought much about waking up at night. It had become normal. A bathroom trip here, a moment of tossing and turning there, nothing she ever considered dangerous. But now, lying on the cold floor, she saw the truth. It wasn't just a restless night. It was a warning. Waking up multiple times throughout the night might seem harmless, but it's one of the biggest red flags the body can give. Every time sleep is interrupted, the brain is pulled out of its deep, restorative cycles. Over time, these repeated disruptions weaken memory, slow down cognitive function, and even increase the risk of dementia. Margaret had noticed it, the way she forgot little things, the way conversations sometimes blurred together, the way she walked into a room only to forget why. She had blamed it on age. She never realized her broken sleep had been stealing pieces of her mind night after night. But that wasn't the only danger. Standing up too quickly after waking up can cause a sudden drop in blood pressure, something called postural hypotension. For younger people, it might just cause brief dizziness. But for seniors, it can turn a simple bathroom trip into a life-altering fall. The body doesn't have time to adjust, the blood doesn't reach the brain fast enough, and in an instant, balance is lost. That's exactly what had happened to Margaret. She had spent years trying to protect herself, keeping her home free of clutter, using handrails on the stairs, wearing sturdy shoes. But she never realized that the greatest danger wasn't around her, it was inside her. It was in the way she rushed out of bed, unaware of the silent risks her body was facing. She had been lucky. The fall hadn't caused permanent damage. But not everyone is as fortunate. She knew she had to make changes. She couldn't afford to wake up on the floor again, helpless and in pain. So, she adjusted. She stopped drinking large amounts of liquid after 6 p.m., giving her body time to process fluids before bed. No more waking up unnecessarily. She installed motion-activated nightlights, so if she did need to get up, she wouldn't be stepping into total darkness. But the biggest change? She stopped rushing. Instead of jumping up the moment she woke, she took a breath. She sat on the edge of the bed, let her body adjust, let the dizziness fade. Only then did she stand, slowly, carefully, giving her body the time it needed. And just like that, the fear of falling began to fade. She had spent so many nights ignoring the warnings, so many mornings feeling disoriented, so many moments dismissing the exhaustion as just another part of aging. But now she understood. Sleep wasn't just about rest, it was about survival. And as she sat in bed that night, looking down at the bruises from her fall, she asked herself a question: how many others were making the same mistake? How many were waking up tired, feeling lightheaded, brushing it off as normal? How many would ignore the warning signs until it was too late? And the real question was, are you one of them? Margaret sat in the quiet of her bedroom, the faint glow of morning creeping through the curtains. She ran her fingers over the bruises on her hip, a painful reminder of just how close she had come to losing everything. For so long, she had believed that exhaustion, forgetfulness, and those strange moments of dizziness were just part of growing older. She had convinced herself that waking up feeling drained was normal, that struggling through the day was just something she had to accept. But now she knew better. It hadn't been age that was stealing her strength. It had been the silent mistakes, the warm room that kept her from reaching deep sleep, the late-night meals that forced her heart to work overtime, the sleeping position that had unknowingly strained her body, and the restless nights that had been warning signs she had ignored. These weren't just bad habits. They were small, everyday choices that had been quietly working against her. Night after night, she had spent years waiting to feel better, waiting for the exhaustion to pass, waiting for sleep to come easily again. But she finally understood, change doesn't happen by waiting. It happens by deciding. So she decided. She lowered the temperature in her room. She stopped eating late at night. She switched to sleeping on her left side. She took her time getting up. And little by little, her nights changed. And when her nights changed, her days changed too. She had more energy, more clarity, more strength. For the first time in years, she felt in control. And that's the lesson in all of this. The things that steal our health rarely come in a single, dramatic moment. They come quietly, in the routines we don't think twice about, in the habits we repeat without question. But just as bad habits accumulate, so do good ones. A single adjustment tonight, a cooler room, a shift in sleeping position, a slower rise from bed could be the difference between another restless night and a future where you wake up feeling strong, rested, and in control. So tonight, take a moment. Think about the way you sleep, the way you wake, the way you feel. If something doesn't seem right, don't ignore it. Because the truth is, it's never too late to make a change. And if this story spoke to you, if you found yourself seeing pieces of your own life in Margaret's, then you're not alone. These are the lessons we all need, the kind that help us live not just longer, but better. That's why we created Elderly Wisdom Story, to share the experiences, the lessons, and the wisdom that can change lives. If this resonated with you, if you believe in taking control of your health and your future, subscribe now. Don't miss the stories that could make all the difference for you or someone you love, because the way you sleep tonight will determine how you live tomorrow. And that choice, it's yours to make.